Hey everyone, and welcome to the channel. Today is another One Piece a Day update video. Now, the last time I did a One Piece update video, it was when I just hit 500 chapters and 500 subscribers, so it was a little bit of a celebration. But what I didn't really factor in was how close to the halfway point of One Piece I was getting. Because up until that point, I believe that I was at chapter 500, but One Piece was at chapter 1088, which meant I was only about 44 days away from being the actual halfway point of the manga, and technically halfway through this sort of experiment. Which was interesting because it didn't really feel like a halfway point, and nor should it, because One Piece doesn't have an endpoint at the time of recording, and therefore any sort of arbitrary point could have been the halfway point. But regardless, I had made it through halfway into the franchise, and 500 or so chapters in, it did feel a little bit like a halfway point, or at least where I am now is sort of feeling like a halfway point. It's definitely a capping off set piece sort of thing, and I know that it is the arc just before the time skip. So it does feel like a major sort of set piece and moment right now, but at the exact moment of the sort of halfway point, not exactly. So having said that, I sort of skipped the introduction and everything like that of what this is all about. So if you haven't watched a One Piece a Day video before, basically I challenged myself last year to catch up to One Piece because I felt like I was missing out on the franchise, and the way that I would do that is by reading one chapter a day every single day until I caught up to the franchise. Now, every single day I've been reading one chapter and basically just going along with this journey as it progresses, as it unfolds, watching little snippets of the anime as I go just to see how certain things played out animation-wise and things like that, but generally it's purely a manga journey. Now, I am just about 550 chapters into the franchise as of recording, and from my previous video we just finished a Thriller Bark and Golden Brook. Since then we've done the Sabaody Archipelago, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, we've done Amazon Lily, and I just finished Impel Down. So that's roughly what we'll be talking about today, because each update video I roughly discuss where I'm at, what's been going on, as well as a few key talking points. So generally, where I am in the franchise. So Impel Down's just finished, and Marineford and the Paramount War is just about to start. And it does seem very, very important and very, very cool. And a key part of that is all of the world building that actually happened in the last few arcs. Now, in Sabaody Archipelago, I'm just going to call it Archipelago at this point just because I don't really want to mispronounce things like I did the Jaya arc many episodes ago. So anyway, in the Archipelago, they did a lot of world building about how the government is structured, a lot more of a focus on the admirals and the powers at play, as well as the sort of hierarchical system of the typical citizenry, especially on that island. And as well as how fishmen and mermaids are treated as opposed to regular people, as well as pirates. So that arc wasn't very long, but it was interesting in sort of picking out key points and world building, as well as a lot of the major players that we will be seeing from here on out, because we were introduced to a lot more pirates and a lot more up-and-coming pirates. Like we saw Law, we saw Kid, we saw Hawkins, we saw quite a few people that I don't even know the names of. There's Jewelry Bonnie, just a lot of big personalities that we saw briefly or for an extended period of time that you're pretty much guaranteed will play another role at some point later on. So the Archipelago was incredibly important in sort of building structure to the world a bit more, as well as introducing what else is really going on, because Luffy's not the only pirate in town, and he's definitely not the only one causing as much mayhem and world shifts as we are led on. Like, there's definitely a lot more people and a lot more dangerous people doing things at the same time. So the Archipelago arc was very interesting in that regard. It was also interesting to see just how strong the admirals are, because we saw Kizaru and he just completely destroyed everyone. Everyone was terrified of him, and then we saw the mass production Kuma robot thingies. And again, with Franky, it brings into question what sort of technological level we're at in One Piece. Sort of thing with, like, when I was reading Naruto, it was kind of hard to tell what sort of level of technology we were at, because very, very strict feudal ninja sort of style. And then all of a sudden they've got light bulbs. And you're like, oh, maybe things are a little bit more advanced than we'd let on. And One Piece has that sort of sense as well. So anyway, we had the Kuma robots, and it was a bit weird. They were really strong, and then the actual Kuma shows up not too long after we saw him in Thriller Bark, which was quite interesting. And there's this sort of back and forth thing of they weren't quite sure if the mechs they were fighting were actual Kuma or not. But regardless, this whole sequence and all the battles that took place in the archipelago were the first true time that we saw the Straw Hats completely lose. And I find that very, very important, especially for a shonen series, because typically the heroes always win. They might be hurt, they might get beaten, some characters might die, who knows. But typically they'll always get back up and win. That's the sort of blueprint that Dragon Ball Z, or Dragon Ball in general, wrote many years ago. That's the blueprint that almost every shonen follows to some degree. But this, for like One Piece being one of the biggest mangas of all time and one of the biggest shonens of all time, if not the biggest, it's quite interesting to see something so early on. And that being said, it's halfway through the franchise. But a considerable amount of time has passed in the manga and the anime at this point, and it's a complete loss. And I find that incredibly interesting. And out of that loss, the crew is completely divided. We don't really know what's going on with everyone else. We're typically just following Luffy and what happened in the aftermath of that battle. There are snippets of what's going on just when everyone got transported somewhere. And so you know that they're safe, but you know things are different, and a lot of the one-shots before a chapter starts show what's been going on as well. So I find that really interesting. We had this crew that the entire journey was about them coming together and overcoming obstacles and things like that, completely divided, with, for some of them, no hope of coming back or no hope of meeting up again because they're not as resourceful and they don't have leadership. It's just a whole thing. And I find that very, very interesting. And coming off of the archipelago, we did Amazon Lily, which is a small arc, but still very important, because we were introduced to Boa Hancock, her entire island, so all of the Amazons, but sprinkled throughout it were sort of the role that the Seven Warlords of the Sea sort of play, because they're not strictly government puppets, but they do have government backing. And there's an interesting dichotomy of they're working for the government to get protection for their people or the benefits for their people. So Boa would be one of the warlords specifically for the protection that it entails of their island will not be invaded. Or if it did happen, there would be massive repercussions. So I found that very, very interesting, that there's a reason why they are warlords. It's not specifically just because they want to side with the government or anything like that. They want to do it for specific reasons, and they are still pirates at the end of the day. So I found that very, very interesting as well. The actual arc itself was okay. It did a little bit of extra world building. Boa is an interesting character. She's got really cool powers, and it's sort of weird having a very strange one-sided romance, because Boa is just discovering what love is, because everyone else falls for her immediately except Luffy, who either doesn't care or doesn't get it. But it's fun, and they work well together, and it's a fun little levity in the sort of darker moments of these arcs, because it is building to something very important, which is the impending Ace execution. Due to many factors at play, the government's trying to execute Ace so they can get to Whitebeard and knock down one of the greatest potentials of a new pirate king, because he's sowing chaos wherever he goes, as pirates sort of do. So there's a lot of big players making big moves, and a lot of craziness going on in between, and Luffy's sort of stuck in the middle of it, racking his already exhausted brain on how to save Ace and how to get to him. And things progress, and eventually he finds his way into Impel Down, which is the great prison of the world government, which has multiple floors. Ace is kept at the bottom, or at least what we believe is the bottom, and he'll be executed soon. Luffy does a big prison break. Really fun arc, really crazy arc. Again, very non-traditional structure for one of these sorts of arcs, because you imagine, oh, he'll be super strong and he'll beat everyone. But Luffy doesn't actually encounter that many major characters in it. There are a few that he encounters and beats, obviously, except for the prison warden Magellan, whose fruit power is so counter to basically everyone else's that you cannot beat him. You can stall him, but you cannot beat him. Which is also interesting in another world-building sense of, yes, I can see why you are the warden. You are definitely the one for this job, because no one can break out. You are unstoppable. And the island itself is separated and all sorts of things. There's basically no hope. It's just a bunch of accidents that string together that allow Luffy to escape. But regardless, it is a very interesting arc, bringing back a lot of old characters like Buggy, Mr. 3, Crocodile, Bon Clay. Bon Clay got a massive time to shine. Fantastic character. They were pretty good originally anyway, but Impel Down really let them shine, same as Buggy, because we learned so much more about Buggy and how sort of accidents happen and he gets into mischief and gets into roles that he shouldn't be in. Mr. 3 is way more capable than he was before, and Crocodile is intimidating as always. We also get introduced to Jinbei, one of the other warlords of the sea, who's also imprisoned, and he seems like a very interesting character. I do know what he becomes later and his relationship to Luffy later, but I don't want to dig too deep into that to avoid spoilers. I just know where he winds up. And so it's cool that we get introduced to a character that pivotal that early, which is very cool. And we also get introduced to Ivankov, who is a very interesting character, very weird powers, but very cool powers as well. And they work as another sort of plot point of introducing the importance of Luffy, because we know that Luffy's important. He's the protagonist, of course he's important. But we learn a bit more about his bloodline and how important it is that he is Dragon's son. And we learn a little bit more about the Rebel Army, but not really. And there's a lot of elements at play, a lot of bits going on all at once, and all of these arcs together sort of create a more cohesive bundle. And even though every single island I count as an arc, I think all of these islands informed each other way more than previous arcs did. None of them were as long as some of the other arcs, but I think this worked way better. But yeah, so the Impel Down arc was good. Everything up until then was pretty damn good as well. Everything's tying together way better. The sort of sidetrack stories aren't as intrusive, like the arc just before getting to the archipelago, where Sanji was sort of being... Well, not Sanji was being framed. Someone that looked like the wanted poster of Sanji was being framed because their entire life got flipped upside down after Sanji's wanted poster got out, because no one had a clear photo of them, so they just drew it from memory, and it ended up looking exactly like someone, and it ruined their life. That was kind of a funny arc because it didn't overstay its welcome, and actually played a role later, and not like so long later that it didn't really matter too much, like the Giants on Little Garden. This was sort of more of an immediate thing of, oh, we've resolved this and therefore we can do that. And I thought that was good. It's a much better sidetrack arc than some of the other ones, like the Foxy Pirates did not like that at all. But yeah, so those are where I'm roughly at in One Piece, what I generally thought of those arcs, and so we'll go through a few more of the talking topics that I usually go through. So, favourite character of the arc, I would say probably goes to Bon or Buggy, because both of them were fleshed out really, really well, and both of them had a lot of moments to shine, and we got to learn more about them and their personality and relationship to Luffy. So I think both of them were highlights of Impel Down. Bon is probably more important because of the emotional backing behind them and how that arc is resolved. Very, very good character, and they just developed them so carefully. It's very, very impressive. Things I don't like about the last few arcs. I think that we've sort of hit most of the negative points that I had previously about the length of arcs, the insignificance of arcs, and things like that. I think that the last few have really hit it home and nailed it at every single opportunity. So I don't really have the complaints that I did before for these last little bits. So that's really good to see. Favorite fight in these last few arcs. I enjoyed some of the stuff in Impel Down, usually just like the absolute random chaos and how much stronger Magellan is to the others and how they have to sort of avoid the fight. That was very interesting. But I did like the archipelago fights, in particular just like the snippet battles of showing every single key player pirate's abilities. And I quite like that a lot. Like, I forgot his name, but he's like the mafia boss. And the sequence of revealing his power as like sort of he's got a defensive fortress inside him sort of thing. It's very hard to describe. But it was so perfectly like framed in the manga panels, and I'm sure it's done well in the anime as well, that it didn't seem like it was coming out of him. It looked like it was an actual like fortress that he had created. No, it was just miniature, and it was wild. It was quite cool. I like that. And then you get to see Law's powers, you get to see Kid's powers, and you get an emphasis and sense of why they have such high bounties and why they are spoken in the same breath as Straw Hats and Luffy in particular. So I think the archipelago fights as a whole were probably the favourite fight in these last few arcs. Favourite character is still probably Zoro. I do like Boa quite a bit. I knew I'd like Boa beforehand anyway. But Zoro, he had a very standout moment in the archipelago where everyone was sort of bowing down to the high, like a sort of someone high up in the hierarchy in the archipelago, doing something brutal to someone below him. Everyone's stood back, doesn't really want to interfere, and Zoro, being Zoro, is lost and sort of wanders into the scene drinking, and they look at him so confused, and the person high up looks at him with like sort of disdain and confusion in his eyes, and Zoro's just like, what, do you need directions? And I love that, because this is one of the few arcs where Zoro is very confident in his sense of direction, even though it's wrong anyway, and it's just fun playing on the thing of he's always lost, and it just works very, very well. I like that quite a bit. But I don't think there's much else to talk about. I might do a Q&A thing later. If there are questions you'd like me to answer for a future One Piece video, please leave it down in the comments, because I'd like to have a bit more back and forth with all of you. So I think that'd be nice. But I guess we'll move on to One Piece news. And usually for the news, it's stuff new to me and trying to avoid spoilers as much as possible. That being said, it is incredibly hard to avoid Gear 5 or Gear 5th stuff. I knew about it beforehand, but Twitter has just been filled with it so much that I can't avoid just the surface level stuff. There's more to it, and I don't like getting that more to it. I'm fine just seeing what it is and roughly what it is. I don't need full explanations or showcases or panel by panel things as I'm scrolling through Twitter trying to avoid the spoilers and just seeing more and more. So that's a bit of a shame that I've been spoiled on it, but there is some cool stuff coming out from it, a lot of nice looking figures, and I'll probably jump on those as soon as I can, because I don't want an effect to like what's been happening with most of the other One Piece stuff, which is I've gotten into it, but everything's old or hard to get now, and I regret it. So I think it's better that I jump on this now and get it when it's cheap, or get it before I go, oh man, I wish I got that before. So I want to avoid regret. Hindsight's 2020. So I'll stay on top of this one. But the other stuff that's more important and more immediate to me, I got a new Luffy figure, and this is from the Run 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 series, which is a new series of figures which is loosely based on one of the ending themes, I believe, of One Piece, and basically it's all the characters as kids running. And very simple concept, very simple designs, but basically why I got this was because I wanted a kid Luffy, and the Portrait of Pirates kids ones do exist, but they are a bit dated now and some of them are hard to find, and I thought this would be a nice one to get in a sense of completing a set of Straw Hats and having them all as kids, because I like them all as kids. Excuse me. And a lot of the most emotional story beats in One Piece tend to happen when they're children. So I thought it would be interesting to get that. I got into the line immediately expecting a lot of things from it. So the first one's Luffy, the next one's Zoro, then the next one's Yamato, and the next one's Uta, or it's Uta, then Yamato, either or, and I was like, oh no, we're skipping the Straw Hats straight away, aren't we? And that bothered me. And then the next one's Law, and I was like, oh no, it's still skipping. And then the next one's Sanji. So if we can get all the Straw Hats at some point, that'd be nice. Speaking of the SH Figure Arts, the next one was Yamato, which pre-orders just went up. And very cool, comes with an alternate face for Luffy, which is the face that the base Luffy was missing, which is the classic One Piece smile. But they also teased Kaido, who's massive and looks really cool, but I'm probably not going to buy it because he's, one, too big and too expensive for something that I don't care about right now, and I do have some Kaido stuff already, and I think that's fine. It's going to suck if he comes with cool accessories for Luffy, but so be it. But then they announced the next one after that, or at least one that's coming up after that, which is the Gear 5 Luffy figure arts. And that annoyed me even more because we're already doubling up on characters and we don't have as many Straw Hats as we should. And yeah, just One Piece stuff annoys me. Just because I want to complete a set of the Straw Hats and I don't want it to be pre-owned. It's very simple, but very specific criteria. And then the other part that I got was the One Piece Card Premium Collection. Now, there's a Film Red Premium Collection as well, but that's not out yet. I saw this released in Japan and I thought it was really, really cool. I was going to buy that one, but then I heard that they were going to do an English version, and it's very simple. There's no random cards in this. It's just a cool collector's set. It roughly showcases what cards are here, and when you open it up, it's all 10 crew members as special cards. These are cards that already exist, I believe, but they're new art and a more premium finish on them to make them look really cool. Hopefully I'll have a bit of a B-roll up as well so you can see how nice those look separately. But it's just very nice. It's all done in manga art because I like Oda's style, and it's just very nice, very clean. Some of it's a bit inconsistent in terms of some of them are zoomed in portraits, some of them are sort of mid-shots, some of them are further away, but it's still cool. And yeah, that's really nice. And that's about it for One Piece news for me, and yeah, just gonna have a look at those things hopefully in future videos. I'm probably gonna look at upcoming One Piece cards as well, but not buying as many as I did before. Learnt my lesson after OP3. But there's not much else to talk about really for One Piece a day. I did 3 arcs and I have less to talk about than I did in previous videos, but I think that might be a bit more because my focus is a little bit more pinpointed instead of a bit more waffling on. But that's just how I feel. So yeah, I think that the last few arcs were quite interesting. I think we've learnt way more about the world, and I think Oda very carefully does world building and very deliberately does it. He doesn't over-explain things and doesn't dwell on things too long, so it feels like you're always progressing and always getting little tidbits and tying it all together. Like, they're not shoving it in your face saying this is how things are, at least not all the time. But it's more like they're giving you little crumbs and you sort of put those together and you get a larger whole, which is nice. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed that video, and I will see you all next time.